At 5:45 a.m. on December 31st of 2023, my sweet, sweet mother passed away. I wanted to make this video because I feel that it is so important to share with you my direct experience with death. My mother and I were so close. We shared so much life together. She was my best friend. She was my confidant. She was my biggest fan. We had businesses together. We created things together side by side, and I lived with her for most of my life. So to say that we were close is an understatement. My intention for making this video is to be able to help just one person. If I can help one person feel that they are not alone, that they are not lost, that hope is still alive, then I will have done my job today. Before I begin, if at any point you find that this video is helpful, then please like and subscribe so this message can reach more people who might also benefit from watching. The C word. Receiving the news that my mother had cancer was not something that was easy to stomach for us or her. So we spent the next several months trying to figure out all the different ways that we were going to approach her healing. We decided to go with immunotherapy. The type of cancer that she had was melanoma. And unfortunately, by the time that we did realize she had cancer, it was already stage 4, so it had metastasized to various parts of her body. And the immunotherapy treatment, we were able to give her one treatment, but she was really so weak that was the only treatment that she was able to receive in the following months that she lived. And even though my mother did pass, that was just what was in the cards for her. But I want everyone to know that the most important thing you can do in the healing process is to hold on to hope. There is always hope. There is always potential for a miracle. And that is the energy, that is the spirit inside of us that allows you to wake up in the morning. It's the juice that keeps you going. So it's so important that you never, ever, ever lose sight of hope. The healing process. I consider myself a healer. And so once I found out that my mother had cancer, it was my mission in life to heal her. And I realized that we actually come from a family of healers. Most of my father's side of the family are faith healers. So we called in all the troops and everyone came to the hospital, and my uncle, my cousin, my first cousin, they would all stand there and they would pray and pray, and we all circled my mother and we stood there, and even the caretaker that we had hired, who was there 24/7 with my mom, was also a healer of sorts. She had a deep, deep faith and belief in Jesus. And even though I don't consider myself a religious person, I was very open to the possibility of all different types of healing. So we approached this with a very open heart and an open mind, and whoever felt that they could heal her, we welcomed them. So my family members came and we stood there in the hospital, and we had days and beautiful ceremonial healings for her. Because my mother was in such a surrendered state, because she was so weak, she had no choice but to receive all of these healings that we were giving her. And even though she wasn't maybe healing on a physical level, I knew deeply that she was healing on a spiritual, on a soul level, on an emotional level. There was a lot of healing that was happening for my mother, and it was very, very beautiful to witness. And all of these healings that took place were equally as healing for us, for my family, for myself, for my brother, for my father, even for my son, who was very, very close to my mother. She was a second mother to him, really. And we all got to experience this incredible amount of healing. And the healing that took place was this incredible outpouring of love. We were all present with my mother. We were so loving. We were literally pouring tons and tons and tons of this loving energy into her. And she was receiving it. And it was beautiful. My mother was in and out of the hospital. She was at home a lot of the time, But she had an issue with her lungs. She had pneumonia several times, so sometimes the oxygen tank that she had at home wasn't enough. She needed a very strong amount of oxygen, so we had to take her to the hospital and administer higher amounts of oxygen there. So what we did was we created this sanctuary for her in the hospital room that she was in. And we had all of these beautiful affirmations that I had created and printed, and we posted them all over the wall in her hospital room. And we even had this beautiful sign that my brother made that was posted on the outside of the door, and it was for all of the hospital staff to read and to alert them that they were about to enter this sanctuary. And we asked them very nicely to not use any negative words. And if they had any negative energy or judgments about my mom before they entered the room, that they would leave those behind and choose to see her as well, and not to project any negativity when they were going to administer medication or work on her in any way. So that was really exciting, and it had a really profound effect on everyone in the hospital. And I felt that it was such a learning experience for the staff, because we were really taking this beautiful initiative to stay positive and to hold on to faith and healing and to project this incredible amount of love towards my mom. And they really got on board with that, and it was really wonderful to see. So if you have a loved one, or if you yourself are in a hospital setting, I highly encourage you to get some friends or family to create this beautiful sanctuary for yourself or the loved one, and create affirmations that speak to you and put them on the wall. We had beautiful flowers for my mom and candles that were LED so that we wouldn't burn the hospital room down. And there was a little waterfall, and you can add stones or anything that speaks to you. I was reading my mother Rumi poetry, and you can really incorporate all sorts of lovely things. We even had aromatherapy in the room for her, which was lovely, like a little mister. You know, you can create a beautiful sanctuary for yourself, whether it's in a hospital room or in your home. But it's important to create that intention for staying positive and in the space of healing, cleaning house before it's too late. I realized early on, once my mother received her diagnosis, that it was going to be very important for me to make sure that there was no bad blood between us. My mother and I were so close. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we had 4 businesses together, and those businesses were basically her and I working side by side, creating different things together. And we lived together. I lived with her for more of my life than not. And she helped birth both of my children. She was my birthing coach. And she was just my #1 fan. There was nothing that I didn't want to share with my mother. And having said all that, there were still times when her and I would argue and we would butt heads, especially during the creative process. We had a very different way of working and approaching things creatively. So we definitely argued and fought. And as soon as I realized that my mother was very ill, even though my mother and I weren't fighting at the time, I wanted to make sure that she knew that I forgave her and that I could receive forgiveness from her for any time that I had done anything that was wrong or unkind. So luckily, I remember it was probably October when she had just received this diagnosis of having stage 4 cancer, and she wanted to go outside. So my brother, she wasn't able to walk. She had a huge tumor in her right hip. So we put her in the wheelchair and we carted her outside, and we had this lounge chair outside in her backyard. And she was out there, and I decided that I was going to give her a manicure and a pedicure, and it was a beautiful little time just for her and I to bond. And she was still cognizant, luckily, during this time. So I took this as this wonderful opportunity while I was cleaning her toes and her hands and giving her this manicure and pedicure. And I looked to her and I told her, "I love you, Mom, and I am so, so sorry for anything that I've ever done. Will you forgive me? Please forgive me. Please forgive me, Mom." And she did. And we both cried. And it was beautiful. But it really, really helped any sort of little grievances that her and I might have been holding on to over the years. It was this beautiful thing that I had never thought to do before. And it's funny because now I've been doing that with all of my friends. You know, anybody that I've fought with over the years, or I've had any little teeny little thing that has created some funny tension between us. And I've just called them and I just tell them that, you know, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for any little thing that I've done. This is very common in 12-step programs. You know, they ask you to go through a list of people that you might have wronged and that you feel that you would like to ask forgiveness for. So please don't wait until somebody that you love or you has a diagnosis that is terminal. There's something so liberating about cleansing yourself, asking for forgiveness, and for forgiving someone else for doing any little wrong or major wrong. Please don't hold on to any grievances. It is what's blocking you from feeling the beautiful flow of life that is within you. The dying process. I made my way over to the hospital. It was 1 a.m, and by the time I got there, I could see that my mother had dramatically shifted. There was a change in her eyes. She was kind of, you know, had her head turned like this and her eyes were staring off, and there was just something gone about her. There was this look in her eye that just, she really wasn't there. And her breathing was very different. It was very heavy and labored and in a way that's hard to explain. But she was hooked up to a high airflow oxygen tank. She had about, I believe, 40 liters of oxygen at the maximum concentration, which is as high as that machine can go. So she had that going on. She had all sorts of tubes and IVs. She had a GI tube. And anyway, she was really hooked up to lots of different types of equipment. And the main monitor that I was looking at was her blood pressure, her pulse, her number of breaths per minute, and her oxygen saturation. So I was looking at those 4 numbers pretty maniacally. And I tried to call my brother again. He finally looked at his phone after he had gone to the bathroom, gave me a call back, and made his way over with my dad. So I sent the caretaker home, and it was just my brother, my father, and me standing beside my mother. And around 5:30, we started to just basically realize that she was going to pass. And so it was a really special moment for me. I wanted so much. I asked Source, you know, my God, my idea of the infinite. And I was really in a state of praying so deeply, asking so fervently that I get to be with her when she passes. I knew that there was something there for me, besides my deep, deep desire to want to be with her and know that she knew that I was with her so I could see her off. I also knew that there was this very, very important lesson that I was going to learn by witnessing the process of watching her die. Around 5 a.m., I had decided that I wanted to get closer to my mom. So I sat in the bed next to her. I was on her right side, my brother was on her left, and my father was standing there holding her feet at the foot of the bed. And my brother and I each had one of her hands, and I remember holding her arm and her hand and just watching her. There has never been a time in my life when I was more present and I was more with someone than when I was watching my mother pass away. There was something so intensely beautiful about it and so intensely sad about it as well, because I knew that I was just watching her take her final breaths. And there was something so incredibly extraordinary about the entire process. You know, I was going back and forth from watching this monitor, watching her saturation slowly drop, her blood pressure was dropping, the number of breaths was dropping, and her pulse was dropping. And we could watch her take these breaths. Everything was slowing down. She'd breathe like this, and I was breathing with her. It was so, so intense. And she would stop breathing after a while. She'd hold her breath for maybe 10, 15 seconds. And I'd gasp for air, and then she'd, take a breath finally. And that just continued to happen until we finally watched her take her final breath. And I was honestly in a state of complete and utter disbelief, because I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that she had passed. And, after she took her last breath, I looked at the monitor, and I'd watched so many movies. That was really my only experience of watching somebody die. I had seen one other dead body, and it was an open casket, so they had makeup on, and I didn't really get a sense of what a dead body really looked like. And even then, I thought, this looks nothing like this person that I used to know. But with my mom, it was this bizarre realization that she was gone. And it was almost impossible for me to wrap my head around that concept. And I looked at this machine, and I was expecting her to flatline, and that didn't happen. The numbers were still there, and I was so confused. And I looked at my brother and I said, but the numbers are still there. And he said, sweetie, she's gone. She's gone. And I just threw myself on her body. I just could not believe that it was real. And I remember trying to close her eyes because her eyes were just open. And I remember thinking, in movies, they're always closed. Why are her eyes open? And no matter how hard I tried to close her little eyelids, they just wouldn't close. And it was so strange to me, the whole thing. I just could not understand it. And the weirdest thing was, while all of this was happening, I was watching this person, Margot, throw herself at her mom's body and then go over to her brother and almost collapse because she was just in shock. And I was watching my brother hold me, and I was sobbing. I mean, this deep, deep sob. And he was holding me, and we were all crying, and my father even cried. I had never, ever, ever in my life seen my father cry. I didn't even understand what was going on. I was looking at him thinking, what's happening to him? What is that water pouring out of his eyes? I've never seen that. And his experience with it was so beautiful. He found the whole thing so sweet. He sat down because he was overcome with this feeling of sweetness. He thought it was just this beautiful, beautiful, poetic thing, And the only thing that I can think of when I watched this whole process happening, it was like this candle, with this very dim flicker of a flame slowly going out. And the other thing that I can somewhat compare it to is like reading this beautiful book, and you read that last sentence, and then you see that period, and you know that the book is over, and you know it was so good. It was so good, and there's something bittersweet about it. It was so sweet because it was such a beautiful thing that you got to watch. You watched the whole thing happen. And that's how I felt with my mom. It was this beautiful ending to this beautiful life. And then it was done, and it was closed, and I had to close that book and put it away, put it on the shelf. So the next thing that happened was they put this sheet over my mom, and I found it to be so incredibly disrespectful because that was my mom. You're throwing a sheet over her. So I ran over and I took the sheet off, and I looked at her, and I tried to start to take all of the tubing out of her. She had oxygen in her nose, and I tried to take all the stuff out of her hands, and she had a GI tube. I wanted her to be free of all of those things. But my brother put his hand on my back and he said, Margot, sweetie, just let them do that. You just have to let them do that. She's gone. And at that moment, I looked at my mom, and by then it had been several minutes since she had really passed. And there was absolutely no life left in her. Her skin had turned gray, and she looked like a wax figure. It was like something that you would see in the window of the Wax Museum on Hollywood Boulevard. I've never been in there, but I've driven by enough times to see those sculptures, and that is exactly what my mother looked like. it was like this grand cosmic joke. And the joke was on me because that was not my mother. And I realized this profound realization that we are not the body. And I know I've said that so many times, and I truly did believe that up until that point. But this, my friends, was confirmation. This was confirmation that this body, this corpse that was here, had nothing to do with my mother, Linda. Absolutely nothing. And that what I had been in love with, the woman who was my mom, who I had loved my entire life, was the energy, the life that was animating that corpse that I was looking at. And that is what I love about everyone around me. Now, as I walk around and I see strangers and friends and my family, my life partner, I see them in such a different light. I realize my partner, for example, I look at him and he's a striking 6'4" guy with muscles and beautiful hair and a beautiful exotic face. And I think, oh, what I thought that I found so attractive about him has absolutely nothing to do with his physicality. What's making his physicality look so beautiful to me is that animating life that is him. That is what I'm in love with. It has nothing to do with him as a physical body. Even now when I look at my son, I see, oh, he's so sweet. He has such an incredible amount of sweetness in him and goodness and brightness. And that has nothing to do with his body. That has everything to do with his soul. And I just think it's so wonderful when we can have the ability to look at everyone that way, because we start to see the divinity in everything, in everyone, in animals, in plants, in literally everything that is around you. Start looking at that life instead of looking at a body or the physical form. There's something so liberating about this. There's something so freeing about knowing that my mother didn't actually die. What died was her clothing. What died was her physical form. And what was left, what is left, is all of the love that I have for her and all of the love that she has for me. It's right here. It's inside me. It is part of me. And there is no escaping it. There is no denying it. It's the most beautiful thing. It's like everything that I experienced with my mom has become distilled into this incredible source of love. And it is so incredible to feel that she isn't gone, that she's with me at all times. Just like that experience, if you watch that video that I share my experience about meeting God, and the big takeaway in that realization that I had was that God is always with me, always. There is never a moment that God is not with me. And it's the same with my mom. There's never a moment that she's not with me. The North Star. There were so many difficult decisions that me and my family had to make during this last 3 months of tending to my mom while she had cancer. But the thing that I realized, and this is the biggest takeaway from this dying experience that I had with my mother, the biggest realization was that even though we had to make so many difficult decisions, whether it was to decide to put a GI tube in her, or to decide that we needed to take her to the hospital, or whether or not to give her a certain type of medication, it was just an endless list of things that we needed to take care of. And what was odd was that it didn't really take us more than several minutes to make these decisions. And the reason why that is because my family and myself had such a deep love for my mom. And so our guiding star, our North Star, our point of reference, our intention that we set every single time that we made a decision about my mom was being guided through that love. So everything that we did became effortless. Effortlessly, things would fall into place. Decisions would be made. And it was so easy. It was so simple to make these decisions. They weren't easy decisions in the sense that we didn't like having to make them, but coming to the clarity and the understanding that we needed to make those decisions was like that. And I promise you, when you use love as your guiding star, your North Star, when that becomes the thing that guides you, you can never, ever get it wrong. You can't get it wrong. I promise you, you will only get it right. So this is how we need to live our lives. If you use that guidance, if you check in with yourself and you say, what is my intention behind doing this? Am I doing this out of love? Yeah, I am. Great. Then you know your answer. Then you know it's right. Then you know that you can never get it wrong. Getting punched in the face. For as long as I can remember, once I understood this concept that my parents were going to die, I was worrying about it. And as young as my early 20s, I can remember my mom and I joking about this idea that if she died first or I died first, whoever died first, that we were going to promise each other that we would haunt the other one. So if I died, I was going to haunt her. And if she died first, I'd say to her, Mom, promise me that you're going to haunt me if you go first. And she'd giggle and she'd say, okay, Margot, I promise. So I had this real sense that I really did not want my mom to die. And I would think about it constantly, especially as I got older. I remember thinking when I was living with her, I'd go into her room early in the morning and I'd think, oh, is she going to wake up? Is she alive? So it was this constant sense of anxiety. And now that she's gone, now that she's passed, it feels like getting punched in the face. I somehow thought that I had this plan, I had this idea that my mother was going to evade death somehow. One of my favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson. He says, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's how it feels when someone you love dies. It's like getting punched in the face. I'm not going to lie to you. And the liberating thing, though, is that now I've received and experienced that punch to the face. There's really nothing else that I'm afraid of. You know, that was like the final thing, the final barrier to my liberation. This idea that I was going to lose my beloved mom. And now that she's gone, and now that I know that I never really lost her, and that we can never really lose anything, we never lose the love that we have for one another. It just changes into a different form. She went from form to formless. And there's something so liberating about that. There's nothing I'm afraid of now. It's funny. I just feel like I can do anything. I feel like none of it really matters. And my life, my time here is so short. It's so short. Why not just liberate ourselves? Why not do all the things that we've been afraid of doing? Why not let go of all of it? Just let it go. Just be. Just allow yourself to experience this incredible journey that we call life. Just allow yourself to experience it because it is such a trip. Here's the thing. Our life is so precious. So please don't spend it feeling sad and feeling that you've lost a loved one. Spend it celebrating them. Spend it living your life and enjoying all of the form and the beauty and the beautiful life that is around you. I love you all so much. Until next time, remember to let go. Let go of trying to be anything other than the truth of what you are.